Now that you are a little bit familiar with Python shell, let's have some fun with it. We can use the Python shell to do math for us. For example, let's add 2 plus 2, hit enter. Python immediately gives you the answer 4. Now, let's give it math that's a bit more difficult. Python says, easy. Let's print out our names. Try to keep up, my friends. Hit enter. Cool, huh? Let's tell Python shell to print out the city where we live in. Nice! We can also use the Python shell to do multiplication. Now that you understand how to write simple math in Python shell and have it do the work for you, I think you're ready for the next steps. Let's talk about something called variables in Python. Variables is a way in which you can tell a computer to keep something in its memory for a long time. Sometimes you want to ask the computer to give you back what you saved in this variable. Variables in Python can be used to store text such as words or sentences. They can also be used to store numbers, like your age. Or they can be used to store decimal numbers, like amount of money in dollars and cents. I like to think of variables, kind of like my sock drawer. Here, let me show you what I mean. I like to imagine my sock drawer is like how computer memory works. You can use this to store your socks that you may want to use later. Here we are, inside my sock drawer. Right now it's empty because all my socks are in the dirty laundry. This is kind of how a computer's memory is when you first start Python. It's empty. Free of anything. But then, all of a sudden, it's laundry day. All my socks get clean and here they come into my drawer. You can think of these socks as places where I can save these things about me for safekeeping. Right now, they are all empty since they just got washed and put back in the drawer, but let's fill them up. Let's see, my favorite number is 8. Let me save that in my sock used to store my favorite number. There. Now, let me fill in my favorite soccer team sock. That's easy, it's Barcelona. So here they are. Then, I have the sock that I use as a piggy bank to store my money. And finally, I have my favorite car sock. My favorite car is a Lamborghini. So believe it or not, this is kind of how a computer's memory works when you are writing code and saving information that you want to use later. As you can see in this example, it's kind of like storing things away in your trusty socks that you can retrieve from at a later time. I like to call this, my Python socks. I will show you in a bit how this works like with real Python code. But for now, keep this in your mind as how variables are used with Python to store information that you can use later. In fact, let's take a look to see how this would look in real Python code. Wasn't that transition from my regular old sock drawer to Python code awesome? Or did you notice how my favorite sock names were changed from multiple words to one word connected with the underscore? See, Python wouldn't understand a variable name like this. Python will think it's 3 different variables and it will think it's an error. So instead, we need to add the 3 underscores to make it all into one word, and one variable. Truth is, as long as it's one word, you can create a variable that says anything. For example, We could have just named the variable this. But see how much not fun that would be? I mean, how would I know what is inside my XPython socks? Or my X variable? That's no fun. Instead, always remember that when you create your Python socks to store things, or your Python variables, name is something very descriptive. That way, you know exactly what's inside of it. So back to our list of variables. Or as I like to call them, my Python socks. What do you say we go into our Python shell and I show you how these would look and act in there? Come on, we've gotten this far, let's take it all the way my friends. Now, I'm going to create here in Python shell, a number of variables. I will store the same things that I was storing in my Python socks I showed you earlier. Remember, these will be your own variables. Your own Python socks. You can store whatever you want in them. Also, notice that I'm putting a single quote at the beginning and at the end of a word that I'm assigning to my variables. This is required in Python. If you don't add these, the Python shell will give you an error message. Oh, and one more thing. You don't need to capitalize variables in Python like I'm doing here. You can do it all in lowercase if you want. But I like to use capital letters for these examples. There you go. All my variables are finished and my information stored in each one. Now that we have stored the information variables, let's use what is stored in them and do some interesting things. Here, I'm going to use the information stored in my variables to write sentences. I encourage you to write along with me, but use your own values stored in your variables. You can even change the wording of the sentences. I'm going to call on my variable value for my favorite soccer team. Hit enter, and my sentence is built automatically with the information from my variable. Let's write another one. Remember friends, feel free to change the wording of the sentences, or even make up your own entire sentences and using whichever of the variables you want. You can write up some funny stuff, kind of like I'm writing here. Well, actually more like wishful thinking, but I still think it's funny. Notice that if you keep writing in the Python shell, it will just go to the next line automatically. No need to hit the enter key or anything. Also, notice that yellow rectangle that comes up while you type. These are generated by Python to help you fill in the functions correctly, just in case you need help. But we will talk about functions in lesson later on. Hit enter. And there you go, 2 sentences put together by incorporating the values stored in variables. What did you come up with? Did you write up some funny sentences or clever greetings? To get good at writing code in Python, you need to practice, practice, practice. So spend some time in your Python shell working with different ways of using your variables to build sentences. I'm sure you'll make some mistakes while trying to write something cool and you may end up getting these syntax errors from Python. Like this one. Watch! Instead of typing parent, I'm going to type parent, f. And for good measure, I'm not going to type a comma between my sentence text and my variable. Hit enter. Instead of a response from the Python shell, you'll get a message that says syntax error. What that means is Python did not understand what you were asking from it because something in your code was not written correctly. No worries my friends. All you need to do is look at your line of code to see where the mistake is and rewrite it again. Try doing this on your code whenever you get a syntax error. Do it until you get it right. That is what is so great about working with Python shell. You get to see right away if something is wrong with your code. This way, you quickly learn how to improve your coding skills. I can't stress how important this is. You will make many mistakes. But don't get frustrated, my friends, this is just part of the learning process. During the time I have been learning how to write Python code, I think I learn best from my mistakes. I think it's because one learns from mistakes and your brain just adjusts to avoid making them again. But don't take my word for it. Find out for yourself. Keep typing whatever you want on that Python shell window. Make mistakes. Have fun. When you think you're ready, come with me to the next lesson whenever you're ready. I'll be waiting for you, my friend. Great job coding, buddies! In this lesson, we learned about variables and how they are used by Python to store values we can use later in our code. Or what I like to call Python socks, where we can store things for later use. Later on, we will learn how to use these variables to write entire programs and help us run code logic. It'll be great! And this also takes us one step closer to helping me program my super robot. Thanks, guys!